it probably made Laban even angrier in his pursuit that somebody stole those in the first place. And she's putting everybody at risk. And on top of that, she's a hold of something that she has no business being a hold of if she's a follower of God. Nobody knows it at this point, and they don't find the gods that were stolen, because Rachel lies about it and hides them. And at that point, when they can't find them, in verse 36 of 31, Jacob's angry now. And he's got all these relatives that are there also, and they're witness to this whole drama that's coming down. Laban originally brought them for support for him, because if there was going to have to take some action, he needs people to help him do his dirty deed. Well, things aren't going real well in that area, and Jacob gets angry at this point, and he, in front of the relatives, he makes the point of how badly Laban had been treating him over the years, and how for 20 years he had worked very hard to take care of the family. And after he gets done with that, Jacob's argument is devastating to Laban. It makes him look really bad at this point. And Laban has a little hissy fit in verse 45 and 46. And he says some things that are just crazy for our ears to hear in this day and age, when he says, the women are my daughters, and the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. And it's hard to believe that he would say such a thing. I mean, to me, I use the word petulance, like a childish temper tantrum that he's having concerning what Jacob has done. But he knows he's lost. He's lost the argument. The relatives are obviously sticking with him. And to save face, in verse 44, he suggests a compromise. He suggests that they do a covenant. And that's to get him in a better light in the situation. So in verse 45, I'll start reading there. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took the stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar's Sodutha, and Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is between you and me today. This is why it is called Gilead, and it is also called Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. So at this point, you can see that he realizes he's lost the argument. And Jacob, or Laban says, let's have a covenant. Well, Jacob makes a suggestion, let's set up a pile of stones. That was common in that culture, to set up a pillar of stones to mark a location where a significant event happened, so people would remember it in the future. This is Jacob's idea to do this. And Jacob even looks to the relatives and asks them what? Concerning the pillar. What does he ask the relatives to do? Verse 46.
Gather stones.
Yeah, help out. So he gets the relatives involved in this whole action too, of setting up this pillar of remembrance. It's a covenant. It's a deal they're making. So he's getting the relatives involved, because he can see that the relatives now aren't fully on Laban's side anymore. And they name the place. And Laban says, this is a witness. And when you get a little further down into the verse down here in what's it, verse 50, I think it is. Do you see any humor in verse 50? What Laban is saying right there?
My daughters.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that too. If you mistreat my daughters, and then what else does he say?
Yeah, let God be a witness.
Yeah.
Like you really pray to God.
Yes.
Yeah.
God is the one that caught him in the lies in the first place.
Right.
And now he's trying to turn around. Yeah, your God's going to be the witness between me and you if you start doing some things wrong. Then he tells him, you can't marry any other women besides my daughters, which Jacob probably would have never done that, but who is he to even say such a thing? So it's kind of humorous to hear Laban trying to push his chest out here and throws his weight around a little bit because it's totally ineffective. And it's kind of silly for him to claim that God's on his side too, because he's not in this particular instance. So, and then they make an oath at this point too. What's the meaning of the oath? What's the purpose of the oath?
So no harm comes to either party.
Yeah, and I think it's basically saying, here's a line in the sand. I'm not gonna cross this line, you don't cross this line. Our families are gonna stay separate and apart. There's gonna be no hostilities between us. And he says towards the end there, he says, may the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father judge between us. Now, at that point then, Jacob says in the next verse, he says, so Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father, Isaac. What's the difference? What is Jacob specifying in this argument by saying this?
He
Go ahead.
just swore by the earthly father that he had, not the spiritual father.
Right, and he's also saying there's a difference in fathers here too.
Absolutely.
Laban's father was who? It was Bethuel, and his father was Nahor.
Yeah.
And that was not the lineage of Jacob. Jacob's father was Isaac through Abraham. So they have different fathers. You notice Laban leaves out Isaac. Jacob brings Isaac back into it because for the fear of his father Isaac, and there, generally speaking, there should have been a fear of Isaac too, because he has a very large family himself. And if Laban would choose to hurt his sister's son, which is his nephew, you don't think Isaac and Rebekah back in Israel are not going to react to that? Of course they will. They would definitely react to that. So he's calling forth the fear of his father that you better treat me right. So that is pretty much the ending of this thing to it. That this particular event here. Any questions or comments on this particular event here? All right.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah, go
It's kind
ahead.
of interesting because it's Mizpah, and I think I'm mispronouncing that, but that's fairly close to Jerusalem because eventually the Israelites end up using that area for worship and everything else.
Oh, okay.
But what's interesting is where Laban was, I think it was about 300 or 400 miles away, is where Jacob went and got his wives.
Mm-hmm.
Yet he chased him all the way, almost all the way back to the promised land, basically in the promised land.
Yeah, Gilead is technically part of the promised land.
Yeah, it's a long ways. It wasn't like it was just a little, because when you read it, you kind of think it was real close to where Laban was, but it wasn't.
No, it was quite a distance. So, yeah,
And the Israelites reading this would have known where Mizpah was too.
yeah,
It would have reflected in that. If you notice in Genesis, a lot of times he uses areas that the Israelites would have known
yeah,
because he wants them to understand this.
yeah. Very true. All right, let's begin in chapter 32 now. Let's start reading there. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. What does it say the purpose of the angels appearing there? It doesn't say, does it?
What was your question?
What was the purpose of the angels appearing to Jacob right here? It doesn't really say, does it? It'll become more obvious a little bit later on, but it's interesting. A lot of times when you look at biblical characters that are that God is preparing people for things, he makes appearances in certain ways like this, a way of reassuring them. I'm still with you. He says, I got an eye on things. So the angels did appear, but he doesn't tell us anything exactly at this point.
It's almost like they're
until
a
later.
marker. It's like they're a marker though, because then he states, this is God's camp. Like I
Yes.
saw the angels, so this must be the place.
Yeah,
Like they were like marking the spot or
Yeah.
welcoming him
Yeah.
in, but that definitely influenced the next statement of this is God's camp.
Yeah, and he would take this as a positive sign, wouldn't he, Jacob? Now, on the other hand, Laban had a vision of God just before this. Was it a good vision? No. God rebuked him for chasing Jacob in the first place. He told him to behave himself and don't do anything to Jacob, or he's gonna have to answer to God as a result of it. So, also notice here that, so Jacob is heading home. Now, do you remember back in previous chapters, what did Rebekah, the mother of Jacob, say to him when he left for Haran to find a wife? Do you remember? She sent him off to get a wife from her brother Laban, and she said something to him specific before he left.
Was it when she said, your brother's trying to kill you, so
Yes.
escape there?
Yeah, and it's connected to that. And what did she say specifically concerning that situation? You're on the right track.
Well, she expected him back a lot quicker.
I'm sure she did.
Was it
Yeah.
to take a wife?
She didn't want a Hittite wife.
Right.
Yeah, that's part of it. She wanted to make sure he got a godly wife and not a Hittite or Canaanite wife. But she said something to him directly when he left. That was very important.
So Esau will cool off, basically.
Yes. And what was she gonna do with that information?
Tell it to Jacob.
Yes.
Or
She
not
said,
Jacob.
huh?
Isaac.
Yeah, she said she'd
That's
send
right.
word when it was basically safe to come back home. Because Esau wanted to do what with Jacob?
Kill him.
He wanted to kill him. So Rebekah said, you got to get out of here. He's going to kill you. So go get a wife. I'll send word when it's safe to come back. Here he's going back now. And is there any mention that Rebekah sent a note to him by messenger somehow? No, there is no mention that his mother told him that, hey, it's safe to come back now. So we're gonna carry on with this a little bit further, but she did say that in chapter 27, verse 42 through 45, just a few chapters back. That's what she told. She said she would send for him. Now, if you let's read a little further here now. Verse 3. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, in the country of Edom. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my master Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, men servants and maid servants. Now I am sending this message to my Lord that I might find favor in your eyes." When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he's coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." What do you think Jacob's initial reaction is? It tells you, but,
Terror.
huh?
Terror.
Terror. He's scared. 400 men, and they're most likely armed, are coming to greet him. Why would he want to send 400 men to greet his brother? So that's a pretty scary situation. Jacob is at a crossroads here, and this is going to be difficult for him. Make sure I get my notes here right. Notice also too, it doesn't say anything about Rebekah in any respect right here. We find out in later chapters that Deborah, the nurse of Rebekah, has died, and they record her death in the scriptures. Notice also too that if you look at later chapters, Leah's death is not mentioned. So both Rebekah and Leah are stated to have been buried in the cave of Machpelah, and that's from Genesis 49:3, which is also a great honor. But Rachel is not mentioned to be in that cave. So there's 6 people in that cave of Machpelah. I have a reason for bringing this all up. There's 6 people in that cave that Abraham purchased for the burial of Sarah originally. Do you know who the 6 people are? Any guesses? Some of them are pretty obvious. Was Isaac there? Absolutely. Isaac was there.
Sarah,
Sarah.
you said.
Turns out Rebecca's there. And Leah's there. Rachel is not. So there's 6 people, including Abraham, in the cave of Machpelah, and these are considered by the Jews as the patriarchs and the matriarchs of Judaism. So, reason I'm mentioning all this to you is that at this particular point, we know that in verse 3, Jacob sends messengers out to Esau to determine his attitude towards him. Would he have sent those messengers out if his mother was still alive? Which would be the safer route? Ask his mom. She's the one that loves him. She's the one that was supposed to tell him something. There's no mention that he sent for a note to her. He's sending notes out directly to Esau. So that's a huge hint that his mother has probably already passed away. And he must have known it too at this point, because he never consults her about this whole situation. So there's little doubt that Jacob would have would not have sought out his mother's advice while she was still living. Why doesn't he ask Dad, Isaac? You could ask him
Dad
too.
doesn't know that this whole thing, right? Does he know about it?
No, not unless he tells him in the note. And was Isaac always friendly towards Jacob?
Yeah, it wasn't his favorite.
No, who was his favorite?
Esau.
Yeah, so if he sends a message, he's probably not sure how that's going to go either. So the only thing he has left to try to find out if he's going to get a favorable review when he comes back home is to ask who? Esau. And what kind of response does he get? One that scares him half to death. And I think most people would be afraid too when they hear that too. So let's read on a little bit further now. In verse 7, in great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into 2 groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well, he thought. If Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. So what's he planning?
Divide us.
And divide, because he's hoping maybe only if Esau is bent on murder and mayhem, maybe he won't lose everybody all in one attack. That's a pretty dire situation. Verse 9, then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I'll make you prosper. Does he remember the promises of God?
Yeah.
Yes. He very clearly repeats it and remembers it, and he is mentioning it for the sake in his prayer to say, remember God, you told me this. You told me to go back, and you said I'm going to prosper. And then he goes on and says, in verse 10 he says, I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become 2 groups. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers and their children. But you have said, I will surely prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. So he remembers all God's promises. Remember, he just saw an angel, or angels met him. So there's more things that for him to look at. And he remembers the promises, but he is fearful. Does that show a lack of faith in God? Think it through.
Yeah.
Does that show a lack of faith in God?
think it shows that he's human.
He's human, that's for sure.
And sometimes we forget
Sometimes we forget what,
who's on your side
yeah?
and the promise that made. You know, I think if you always remember that, you probably start to get a little arrogant, thinking that you're bulletproof.
Good point. Does he feel that way though?
No,
How does he feel?
he's humble.
How humble?
He's afraid.
Yeah, he's scared. And what does he say about himself personally? This gives you a clue why he's afraid.
Because he knows he's
This
not
is a
worthy.
real important point.
He's not worthy, he says.
He's not worthy. He feels like he remembers all the promises of God, but he's doubting not God. Who's he doubting? Himself.
And that's why I said he's human, because I think we all feel that way at times.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important point to be made here too, that a lot of times when our lives are spiraling out of control, we're having difficulties and stuff, we all know the promises of God. We can pick our Bible up and read it anytime we want, and God makes all kinds of promises to his faithful ones. But a lot of times, the reason we lack faith is not that we lack faith in God himself. We lack faith in our own worthiness to even deserve God's blessing. And sometimes we lose sight of that fact too. You can clearly see that is what's going on with him. Notice he says he's unworthy of these blessings. And do you think God is pleased with Jacob and his fears at this point?
I'd say yes,
Okay,
yeah, because he's coming to him. He knows that his fear is always gonna have Jacob coming to God, seeking God for help, or,
okay,
guidance.
okay, good,
If you compare him to where he was before he went and got his wives,
yes,
he was like, okay, God, I'll follow you if you take care of me.
right,
Now he's like a totally different mindset. So he has matured greatly. His faith has. It's still going to mature even more. But yeah, I think God's probably pleased with where he's came from where he was at.
yeah. And I made mention of this, remember a few weeks back, you weren't here then, but you can see all the patriarchs of God as time goes on, and his children too. They all are really diamonds in the rough, and I mean rough. And as time goes on, you can see all the males and the females in the family grow steadily in their faith. And you can see that especially here with Jacob. Notice he's also, not only is he humble, because he has no trust in his own worthiness, but he's also filled with gratitude. Because he mentions everything God has done for him. And that's a way of expressing gratitude. In Matthew chapter 3, verse 5, when the Beatitudes were written, Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit. Would you put Jacob in that category right now?
Yeah.
I think so. There's a good point to be made. And even Christ mentioned too, people who have attitudes like this, who are very humble and filled with gratitude. They still remember God's promises, but they acknowledge their own weaknesses. And when you acknowledge your own weaknesses like that before God, that is partially referring to a method of repentance too. It's a way of saying to God, I know I've done these things, I know I'm wrong a lot of different ways. And so he's thrown himself at the mercy of God. And I think God is always pleased with attitudes such as that. So I think he's in a real good position with God. And it's a great example for even way back in the Old Testament here too, that there's people back then who fully understood the grace of God in all their workings with the Lord. So any questions or comments on this section right here? All right, let's move on now. We're going to start in verse 13. He spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, "Go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds." He instructed one in the lead, when my brother Esau meets you and asks, "To whom do you belong? And where are you going? And who owns all these animals in front of you?" Then you are to say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are gifts sent to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us. And he goes on to take, in the next paragraph, each guy gets the same message. So, what is Jacob doing to pad his chances? He's buttering him up. He's doing his best to make Esau happy, because he knows Esau at one point was really ticked at him. And so he's buttering him up. One commentator estimated that the value of all these animals would have, in today's standards, would literally have been about $100,000. That's a big buttering up gift that he's sending out. That's a lot of animals. So I'm sure it had to have an impression on Esau. After several of these groups of riding, you keep saying the same thing. What is going on here, you know? So, okay, now the next section we're going to deal with here is, beginning in verse 22, is a kind of one of the strangest stories in the Bible, I think. But it has a very significant point to it. But it is a strange story. All right, so that night before he meets Esau, verse 22, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives and his 2 maidservants and his 11 sons and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. That's a river. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that the hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. So Jacob is all alone. He sent his family ahead. It's drawing into night. And what happens? Who meets him? Who meets Jacob? A man. It doesn't say who he is. Just some guy appears. And is he friendly? No. No. What does he do? I can't picture how this actually started. I mean, did he just walk over to Jacob and get him in a headlock right away or something? Or trip him or, flip him or something? I don't know how it happened. But nonetheless, they start wrestling. And I'm assuming the man, whoever this man is the one that initiated the action. And how does Jacob do against this guy?
He does good.
He does fairly well, but the man then does something to change the balance here. What does he do?
Touch the thigh area, what was that?
Yeah, he touches,
Hip socket.
yeah, it's hip socket. All right. Anybody ever watch any wrestling matches? Does anybody have the ability to touch somebody's hip and put their hip out of socket? Now, so what does that tell you about this guy? Is he a normal guy?
No.
There's something strange about this guy, something supernatural about this guy. And but Jacob is not giving up. He keeps wrestling with the guy, and Jacob is pretty fierce about the whole thing. And then verse 26, it says, the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." Okay, so the man says, "All right, that's enough. It's time to quit." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." So at this point, clearly this guy is not human, correct? Would you agree with that? There's something about him, and it's something to do with God. He doesn't fully know at this point, at least in the text, it doesn't say anything more than that. But he also tells him something that's going to change. And what's gonna change? What does he wanna change about Jacob?
His name.
His name. Now, it's interesting. Now, this is not the first time in scripture where God commands somebody's name to be changed. Remember, Abraham was Abram, Sarah was Sarai, and I changed it to Sarah. So it's not the first time God had ordained that somebody's name would change, but he gives Jacob a new name. And what's the reason for the name? For the name change there? There's a reason for it. He says what the reason is.
God, and he has prevailed.
Yeah, and there's a certain word he uses that encapsulated somebody who struggles with man and with God and overcomes, and what's that name? Israel. Israel is the new name. So Jacob's name is changed to Israel. So it's a compliment from God saying, I've seen your struggle, you've overcome, you wouldn't give up, you faced with all kinds of obstacles and trials with God and man, and you've overcome. And he says, I'm going to change your name as a result of that. But also too, I think there's something to be said about this too, is that, and this kind of comes out a little bit later on, in Genesis later on, chapter 35, I think it is, verse 11. I think he changed Jacob's name for a number of reasons. Jacob, typically throughout the history with the patriarchs, they were always the head of the family. They were the priest of the family. They handled all the religious matters. They were the chief person in the family line. But Jacob's family is going to grow tremendously, as it already has. And at this particular point, I think it's signifying a little bit with some other verses, is that not only is he head of his family, but he's now the head of a nation. His status is changing, and Jacob's name becomes the name of the new nation, Israel. The Israelites were named after Jacob, who became Israel. So it's signifying that this is no longer just a family, it's now a nation at this particular point. And then Jacob, in verse 29 says, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, yet my life was spared. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he limped because of the hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. So at this point, Jacob has an opinion about who this guy is. What does he think he is?
God.
He thinks he's God. Now, does the verse actually say this, or is this what Jacob thinks?
The verse says it, you have striven with God.
Yeah. So
Well, I don't know if that means that was
It-
God, or it means he walked with God this whole
it's a
time.
good clue. It could be. So some of the commentaries had like three different possibilities. One is that this man is Jesus in human form before he came to earth. One say he's just an angel, and another one says he's the angel of the Lord. How many of you have heard of that phrase before? The angel of the Lord. And it's not a phrase everybody recognizes that well. What is the angel of the Lord? This is the most likely scenario that who this person is. What's the angel of the Lord? There's some examples elsewhere in the scriptures, there's actually quite a few.
I always thought it was Jesus on earth, or Jesus who came down to do the work.
Technically, that is correct. We don't normally refer to him that way, but I think technically it is partly correct. In the burning bush with Moses, you know that person that is there is described as the angel of the Lord. And there's other places too where this individual comes up, what was the other one? Sodom and Gomorrah with Abraham. The angel that met him there. He was the angel of the Lord too. Did
Could it
you?
be the Holy Spirit?
Huh?
Could it be the Holy Spirit?
It could be, it's kind of hard to say. Whoever this person is, the angel of the Lord is not, quote, a typical angel. This person is always endowed with being in the sense of they are God. They are not an angel, they're not a man, it is God, but it's in a different form than what we're used to. God does not appear to Jacob in his true supernatural form here. He appears as a man. Because even Jacob said he saw God and he lived as a result of it. Because the Israelites were the firm belief if you actually saw God, you would die. And there's some truth to that. So the angel of the Lord usually is God in some other form. And sometimes they say, like the burning bush, that may have been actually Jesus that appeared in the burning bush. That was the angel of the Lord at that point. So there's a lot of speculation about this. I don't know quite what to think about it myself, but it does seem to make a little bit of a sense. And there's many instances throughout Scripture where you can see certain individuals appear and they have supernatural abilities, and it seems like they're far beyond an angel. And it very well could be God himself in these particular instances.
Jeff,
Yes,
Galatians 4:14 says, though my condition puts you to the test, you did not scorn or despise me, but welcomed me as an angel of God, as Christ Jesus. Just a hint
yeah,
or a clue.
yeah, the hints are all over the place. It doesn't really fully, it's just like scriptures, it doesn't tell us everything. Somebody was asking me just yesterday, what does hell look like? What are some of the descriptions in the Bible? I said, there's really not a lot. There's really not a lot that describes what heaven's like either. Which, when you really think about it, it makes sense because it's in a different realm. And so it's probably hard to explain, but even in this sense too, describing who God is. Like, how do you explain to a Muslim about a triune God? You know, Muslims think there's one God. But Christians say God is three, but he's one. How do you explain that to people? I know we don't have time to do that right now, but it's not that hard. It's not that hard to describe what it really is. So we need to stop here because we're out of time now. So we're going to leave off here and we'll begin in chapter 33 next time. Any final questions or thoughts?